So here's a somewhat uplifting story to balance out all of the depressing things we have been talking about. Evo Morales has returned to Bolivia after a year-long exile in Argentina following a military coup by the far right of his country, which was, subsequently supported by the US, of course, and following a subsequent victory, or I should say, second victory of the MAS party, which is the party that Evo Morales was a part of. So,
and Jamie, what does MAS stand for the folks?
Oh my God, I'm gonna get this wrong.
It's movement, isn't it? Movimiento Socialismo.
Yes.
Movement towards socialism, I believe.
Yes,
right?
yes.
That sounds right.
So you can see why.
Socialismo.
And it also is Spanish for more.
Oh, also true, yeah. And so you can see why they might be targets of imperial powers. But here's this video here.
I thought it stood for many awesome socialists.
It stands for many things. So yeah, we've got people.
And also we should say follow Ollie Vargas, O Vargas 52, and Kawasha News. They have been getting hit with these misinformation things too from Twitter, because Twitter buys into the logic that if you're going to crack down on misinformation from the right, you have to attack the left as well. And so they haven't been banned from Twitter, but they get these warnings, and frankly, it should be warning like the content's too good.
I have to look into those warnings because they're actually very different from the misinformation one. So I'm not sure what's going on there. It basically says the warnings that Ollie's been getting. And by the way, I had him on 2 weeks ago on Doomed, my podcast. So go check that out. YouTube.com/Matt Binder for the video, or doomedpod.com for the podcast. The ones that he's been getting say something like, we are noticing suspicious activity from this account, which is different than the other one. So I'm not sure what's going on there.
If there should be
anyway, but we didn't say that that's the video of the reaction to Morales returning to the country.
That's right. And
yes.
For anyone who is listening and not watching, the people are saying, we're back in power. Now there's millions more of us, even more than the first time, as they greet their leader, their figurehead of this movement, back into his home country of Bolivia after he crossed the bridge over the border on foot like a real G. Keeping it real.
The problem is that MAS hasn't done the focus grouping on rural Bolivia, where they don't really respond to socialism. That's the real issue here. I mean, there needs to be more.
I heard that the defund the police. I heard defund the police. The slogan cost Morales the election, or caused the coup. I don't know.
Morales is like, this is not the time to be making maximalist demands.
I mean, he did. Okay, I don't want to complicate things too much, but a lot of his working class base was kind of pissed off when he asked them to calm down with the strikes and the blockades and the protests, because it was starting to alienate the middle class, which he also needed to vote for him. But, even the people who were pissed off at him still supported him and wanted to see his party succeed, because it was never just about him. And that's what we can learn from the movement in Bolivia, right? Yeah. We're talking about Obama, we're talking about Trump. Unless you have a real movement behind you, these things are doomed to remain ephemeral. Like, why was Evo Morales able to transfer his leadership to a successor who was then able to run as the figurehead of the MAS party and win? It's because it really was not me, us, right? It was a huge social movement, which only one of the things it does is supports electoral campaigns, right? They also have a huge organized labor movement. They have a huge activated working class base that is able to exert independent power, even in a relatively poor and under-resourced country like Bolivia. So I think we have a lot to learn from them.
And also, I think what's important to talk about too is how they exemplify the intersectionality between working class conditions and race, and just how that is not part of the discussion enough in the United States. But of course, Morales, an indigenous leader, and a lot of his support being working class indigenous folks, like it also just goes to show when you're kind of able to tie those things together and be smart about it politically and understand the bigger picture there, you can be successful.
Yeah, I want to.
Also, though, it speaks to the importance of who you put in power in your administration, because I didn't know this until Ali told me. But Luis Arce, the president of Bolivia now, he wasn't just some senator in Bolivia or something that Evo had to like convince people to like. He was actually the minister of economy for the entirety of Morales's presidency. So this was a guy who basically was in charge of pulling all the impoverished and those in poverty in Bolivia out of that situation. As we all know, Evo Morales was able to really bring Bolivia out of a really tough situation as president. And the poor there were experiencing growth in their own wealth. And so this is a guy who had he had a finger on that. So it's important to also make sure you're in your own presidency, you're putting people in your cabinet who possibly can take the reins of the party in the future.
Yeah, and I would also point out this episode of the Red Nation podcast. Nick Estes talks with Camila Escalante of Kawishan News, one of Ollie's partners, who's also working with Ollie. And I think it is you talk about, there was a lot of protests during Bolivia's, as Jamie kind of alluded to, during his administrations. The point that they make in this Red Nation thing is I think the left that turned on Evo, I think prematurely. I think the perspective that I think Nick points out is Bolivia was under imperial rule for centuries and centuries. And one person and one administration isn't going to actually be able to undo that. The only thing you can do is start to cultivate where you want to go in the future. And I think Bolivia, I think Evo has done a tremendous job at that, and that's why he was such a threat.
Yeah, just to put a button on it with the Twitter warning labels, I think if anyone deserves one of those warning labels, it's the New York Times that tweeted, right? Bolivia's former president, Evo Morales, returned to the country on Monday, a year after his failed attempt to keep power tore the nation apart and sent him into exile.
It's incredible that they got dragged for their initial reporting on this. Then in June, it came out that it was the OAS audit that was wrong, not the results of the election. They corrected themselves. And then now that we're seeing just a complete vindication of what the left was saying, they continue to double down on that framing. I mean, it's almost, and maybe I'm reading way too much into it, but it almost seems kind of retaliatory and smug and
it's justifying the OAS stuff. That's what it is. Right. It's saying because Evo was so persistent in running for office, we can do stuff like the OAS stuff. That's look what you made me do. That's like the Taylor Swift song, right? That's the reactionary anthem. Look what you made me do by continuing to by running in an election we didn't want you to run in.
Yeah,
I mean that's what Yasha Monk's talking about. That's what the New York Times really means too.
And also really to stress here, what the OAS's problem with how the votes the votes came in, what they thought was fraudulent or sketchy back when Morales was reelected last year. The same exact thing happened in the U.S. elections this year, where votes came in later than the night of the election, which added larger totals to one candidate than the other due to the location of the people who voted. In Morales's case, he's very popular in rural areas where there's more indigenous people, and they are big fans of Morales for many reasons. One of them being obviously his economic policies, another being that he's the first ever indigenous president of Bolivia. So, they went for Morales, and those votes pushed him over the edge, but they came in late. They didn't come in right away. Where was the OAS for the U.S. election when all those votes came in for Biden, due to the fact that mail-in voting takes more time to count, takes longer to get to the I mean, it's the same thing, but of course.
And make no mistake, the OAS is every bit of conscious of that dynamic as Trump and the Republicans are of it in this country. There's zero chance that the OAS doesn't know that's the way those ballots come in, because guess what? An analyst that And in the moment, we're telling you that's exactly what's going to happen with these ballots. Like,
Right.
there's probably no fraud.
So like the disconnect of libs in this country kind of going after Trump for this and then embracing what the OAS said is just a complete cognitive dissonance. And it's at best ignorance, and at worst, it's deliberately disingenuous.
Right, David Pakman.